Welcome to the Building Web3 Podcast. Today we have a Web3 growth expert sharing 10 plus actionable tips to take your project to the next level. From leveraging Twitter and Farcaster to optimizing user engagement, Justin reveals the secrets to explosive growth in the Web3 space. Remember, nothing stated here is financial advice. Welcome to the Building Web3 Podcast. Today I'm here with my good friend Justin. He is the founder at Safary. Justin, before we get too deep into what Safary is, let's talk a little bit about your background. So what were you doing before you got to Web3, and what was your come to crypto moment?
Yeah, my background's in two-sided labor marketplaces doing B2C growth. And my co-founder and I dove into Web3 at the end of 2021, and we were immediately fascinated by the potential for new business models and to sort of free them from the powerful intermediaries of our time. But as I explored the space, I was also dumbfounded by the insane growth of all these brand new crypto startups that were achieving insane growth numbers through airdrops. This was in the 2021 bull cycle and other interesting new Web3 native growth strategies. And I was even more confused by the fact that nobody seemed to be talking about it. There was nobody talking about Web3 growth or marketing back in 2021. There were some people starting to talk about what community marketing and community-like growth would look like. But nobody was talking about this space that had defined my career in Web 2. And I thought it was only natural that people would eventually start talking about Web 3 growth as well. I wanted to be one of the first to do so.
Absolutely. And real quick, what is a two-sided marketplace? And then we'll get it all into the growth questions.
Definitely. Two-sided marketplaces are typically companies that have both a business side and a consumer-facing side. So, for example, the one that I worked at most recently was for warehouse workers. So on one side, we had a pool of about 1 million warehouse workers that were looking for daily job shifts, like a Uber driver. And on the other side, we had warehouses and retail businesses that were looking for part-time demand to staff some of their needs to meet seasonal demand. You can imagine warehouses have a lot of needs around like Christmas, or we were also serving large brands like Sephora that around Valentine's Day had big spikes in demand and needs, and they needed more workers to serve them. So yeah, two-sided marketplaces are anything with multiple sides.
And do you see these two-sided marketplaces in crypto? Because that may be an example that resonates a little bit more with our community.
I was about to say, I feel like I have the perfect growth background because everything that we see in crypto, especially when we talk about ecosystems, are multi-sided marketplaces at the core, right? You're aggregating both talent of developers and builders that might be building. You're aggregating capital from VCs to go into the ecosystem to fund the ecosystem operations, but also to fund those builders. And you need growth of users, right? So you have multiple different customer segments that you're trying to serve, and the only way it all works is if it works together. And so that's sort of the challenge and opportunities of marketplaces. They're very sticky because it's hard to get all these different user groups to benefit each other in the right ways, in the right times. But ultimately, if you crack that code, you can build a very long enduring business.
Absolutely. I think we're all interested in cracking the code. So let's talk a little bit about growth. You were working on growth at, Web 2 company, regular company, and you started to see Web 3 taking off, and you saw that there weren't many people talking about growth and marketing. I would say there's still not many people talking about growth and marketing. So talk to us a little bit about, for people that aren't familiar with the marketing space, like what does it even mean to be working in growth?
Yeah. So the way that I think about growth is anything that ultimately drives revenue or whatever your core KPI is for your business. So in Web3, that could be either on the more traditional marketing side, it could be community-led growth, it could be product-led growth, it could be doing BD and partnerships and sales. So I really see it as a broad-based category for whatever it means to move your business forward, the person that's doing that activity.
So would you say it's a combination of sales and marketing, or it's mostly marketing?
For me, I would say it's a combination of sales and marketing, and maybe also, DevRel and some of these other things as well, right? Gets into the complexity we talked about of like these ecosystems that are multi-sided marketplaces. The way that you move your business forward might mean catering to a multitude of different personas, whether that's developers or consumers or institutional investors.
Yeah, let's talk about growing Web3 projects because people listening, not everyone's a founder. Many people are in the community, but let's talk about like you're starting to. I'm going to start Jax's marketplace, and I need to grow my product. So, what are some of the like introductory things that new founders should be considering when they're trying to grow their project if they're going to bring on someone like a head of growth?
Yeah, I think that a lot of it, I mean, this is one of the special and unique characteristics of crypto is that a lot of the beginning stages of growth are actually around brand and narrative building, versus we saw that as sort of a later stage growth strategy for most Web2 companies. You start creating your product, you start seeing how it takes in the market, and then over time, you'd layer in more like performance marketing strategies, and then sometimes later on, you need to differentiate yourself by talking about your brand and really building a world around your company. But I feel like that world building actually begins in the earliest stages for a lot of crypto companies. You need to really get your name out there and develop a niche around something and create that world for users and bring them along on the ride. So a lot of what I would say is the most important for early stage Web3 growth is really beginning to create that story and narrative around yourself and the company and vision you want to build towards.
Yeah, let's talk about narrative creation because narrative creation is so big in Web3, and I don't necessarily see it as much in the Web2 space. Talk a little bit about like what is narrative creation and like why these narratives are important in terms of driving growth.
Yeah, so I think that the truth of the matter for why this is flipped in Web3 is because, frankly, a lot of Web3 products are not as great as their Web2 counterparts. And so the way that you get people to adopt them is by creating a larger narrative around them, right? Why try out Farcaster when Twitter has higher reach with potentially the same amount of people? Well, maybe it's because of the decentralized aspects and the promise of what this is going to create for the world and those types of things, right? So it's the narrative around Farcaster that drives people to experiment on it and the newness and earliness of it to Twitter's already developed. People have been developing their personal brands there for 10 years, but on Farcaster, you can develop your profile and potentially become somebody that's more infamous sooner and cut through the noise. So I think that these narratives are largely used to get people to try out and experiment with new things and showing them the asymmetric upside of that, either through token speculation, but also through the opportunity to be part of something larger than just joining and creating a new profile on X.
Yeah, I really like that Farcaster example. I think that will resonate a lot with the audience. Can you talk about some of the narratives that you've seen in the Web3 space, let's say over the last year, over the last 6 months, that you've seen be really effective?
I think that a lot of it is hype and community driven. A lot of these narratives, and so it can really be for anything. Bearchain, Monad, they're coming out with their ecosystems. There's a lot of hype and speculation around them, but it really stems back to those core people that are driving the brand forward. I think that this is another unique aspect of brand building and narrative building that we didn't see as much in Web2 brand building. Web2 brand building was really creating the story around your brand. But I feel like in Web3, it's creating the story around the people that shape your brand. So that might be the founders, but it also might be, heads of growth and heads of marketing. And this is a unique world or unique new role that traditional Web3, Web2 marketers find themselves in when they're in Web3 is that Web2 marketing largely was a behind the scenes role in a lot of companies. You're analyzing data, looking at different things, managing campaigns, but you weren't really interacting with your core users. But that's also flipped now in Web3. If you're a head of growth or a founder, you need to be front and center and developing a brand around yourself that ultimately will help drive your company's brand forward.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that because let's say we have some founders in the audience like, oh my God, I completely neglected my brand, or hey, we've just been posting from this faceless, nameless, company page, and now I have to be on the forefront. Talk about some ways that founders can start getting their name out there and kind of pushing their project forward. I guess being more creator led.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I can speak to this from personal experiences. I never had a personal brand before I entered Web3, and I actually started out as a pseudonymous content creator talking about Web3 growth. So I think that that's also one way for founders maybe to initially separate themselves from whatever brand that they want to create to really create a space and a personality that they can fully experiment with without sort of having it be too personal, if you know what I mean. Of like, what are my like LinkedIn friends on Web2 going to think about like this new like Web3 founder me? And like, am I ready to like attach my personal brand to all these things? I think that's where like a pseudonymous identity can be really impactful for a lot of early founders starting out, at least as a testing ground to see, what resonates, what doesn't, how does this look, um, before they like fully dive in and say like, this is me. Um, I think that that's one of the best ways to like get started. I feel like for me, I bring this up because when I shifted from being a pseudonymous identity to my real like founder self, it became a lot harder for me to create content, right? Because I thought, oh, what is, my friend Jax going to think about this, and how's that going to reflect on me in a way that when I was posting as a pseudonymous entity, I was just like, this is a growth experiment. I'm trying to figure out what like resonates, what people actually like, etc. So I think that that can take some of the pressure off of it by like sort of like starting in a more distanced way before you really start to build your personal brands. I think a lot of personal brands, the reason why they're so impactful is because they're authentic. So whatever the founder truly feels, they should try and put out there and experiment and see if people like that. I for the longest time didn't really put anything like personal out. I've really just talked about marketing. And now I've been adding some personal elements of my own life into my founder brand as well, and that seems to get people energized and engaged as well. So I think it's an overall content experience of continuing to experiment and figure out what works, and you're never gonna get it right on the first try.
Yeah, it's many iterations. What I always advise people is, hey, the great thing about organic content is if you start posting and it's bad content, almost no one's going to see it because the algorithm picks up on this relatively quickly. If it's good content, it will be federated out. So like, there's very little a downside in my opinion. Let's talk a bit about, what kind of things. So we talked about posting on Twitter. Do you think like founders should be having a newsletter? Should they be going on podcasts? Like what would be like if you had to advise a founder, like, hey, here's the 3-month roadmap where we can start like building your brand and make you guys more creator led. What would you kind of advise them?
I think Twitter is a great place to start for that piece that you mentioned about the algorithm. A lot of people are scared of the algorithm of like it's like this black box and what does this exactly mean? But to your exact point is like you get instant feedback from the algorithm about what people like and they don't like. When you speak on a podcast, you know, I don't know. I won't necessarily know after this whether people like certain parts of the podcast or not. Like I won't get that direct feedback back. And so in the same way, so I think that whatever channel they want to experiment on, whether it's Farcaster or LinkedIn or Twitter or something else, just starting to get posts out there and getting that feedback on what you think that people like and don't like. And you get that not by them telling you, but whether they actually engage with your content or not is a great way to begin some of those early tests.
Obviously I'm a pro video guy because it puts
Yeah.
forth a lot of your personality, and you can also use that to create tweets from. But Twitter is a really good thing in terms of developing your like narratives and your talking points, because you can go out and test what people respond to, and then you know what to talk about, and it kind of directs your content vision. So let's talk a little bit about your own personal journey. So you started as a pseudonymous account, then you started posting a bit more personal stuff or more about Web3 marketing. Can you talk a little bit about like what content you see from your own account that resonates with your audience?
Yeah. I think that, you know, there are a few different aspects. One are like zippy takes, everyone likes those like quick zips of like funny thing that you heard and then like, a few lines on it. Those are like the simple things, but a lot of things that I've also seen, anything with pictures, charts, people love market maps, people love, sort of like things that aggregate information visually. Those definitely get a lot of like resonate really well with people that they like to engage visually. As you're saying too, being able to show your personality in video and posting that even on sort of like more content platforms like Twitter, video also does really well. So I think that those are some of the main things that we've seen. But yeah, however you can turn content into a more visual element really seems to appeal to people.
Yeah, another thing I would tell people is even if you're, let's say you get only 200 impressions, right? If you went to a conference and there were 200 people in the room, you would be hyped. You could reach that
Yeah.
audience every single day, 5 times a day, and people are just always so down on it. I never understood that personally.
Well, that's the like funny irony too. Like we forget that our space is so small, right? And so like if you're getting 200 impressions, you're probably actually reaching a significant number of people more than you would like sitting and giving a conference talk at like ECC, for example, right? Like if you have like 15 people in the audience, that is, you probably actually have like 50 people that are seeing your like 200 impression tweet. So there is a lot more that you can gain from Twitter and other like distribution platforms like this when you're getting your voice out there.
Yeah, let's talk a bit about, marketing. So we talked about a lot about like content marketing, going on Twitter, maybe posting on LinkedIn, joining podcasts. But there are other marketing strategies from like Web2 land, like we know about, newsletters, ads, SEO. What do you see working from like the old Web2 space, but is still a little bit different in Web3? Like what's working from Web2? And then also like what do you see working here?
I think that if we scroll back, a lot of Web3 marketing is still Web2 marketing, right? Like community is Web2, blogs are Web2, Twitter is actually Web2, even though people seem to forget that. Um, Most of the channels that exist are still Web2, and then those that are Web3 are Web2 channels in a Web3 native way, right? So at the core, I'd like to say that the fundamentals of growth are exactly the same as they were in Web2. It's just with new strategies, new data, new technologies, new channels a lot of the time. So a lot of the core things that worked well in Web 2 still work in Web 3, whether that's your blog or your Twitter or something else. I think the best one is still, I might be more on a Twitter maxi and also Farcaster as well in terms of these types of social platforms. But I think that blogs are a really great way to push that larger narrative and vision forward in like a long form content type of way. So I wouldn't make that your like core channel, but I'd say like to start building your initial brands, like can you write a thoughtful piece on your vision moving forward into a long form content? And then that can also be chopped up into shorter form things that make it onto a quicker distribution channel like Twitter or Farcaster.
Now, so if you had to stack rank, it seems like Twitter, Farcaster are the top layer. Then would you say like blogs? And is the blog mostly for SEO, or is it largely just for long think pieces that people can come in and read in depth on your project?
I think it's for the long think pieces more than
Mm.
SEO. SEO is definitely an important part of the equation, but I think that it's a much later stage strategy for a lot of early Web3 builders. If we think about like the average lifespan of like a crypto project, it's probably a year, and most SEO efforts take like 6 to 9 months to like start to really bake. So with that in mind, I think that you should only really be investing in like SEO like strategies if you're like an ecosystem that raised like 100 mil that you're going to be around for some time and want to be able to like rank for that thing with that name. But for a lot of like early stage crypto projects that are still on the hunt to find product market fit, whether they have users and revenue or not, some of these other sort of like more core short term to mid term strategies I think are more beneficial for them.
Mhm. And a big concept in marketing, of course, is a funnel. So when we say a typical funnel that a Web3 company might have is, post on Twitter, send them to like some kind of community, and then that community will essentially lead into inbound leads or customers.
Yeah. We see that the same is like there's like the large content top of funnel with socials, there's like the mid funnel with community, and then there's the very bottom of the funnel, which is transacting. Some people though leapfrog over community as well. People can come to your website, interact with your DeFi protocol, and do what you want them to do. But I would argue that the thing that we can't fully appreciate still in crypto is how much a lot of these like narratives and like understanding of a brand's value impact that user journey still, right? I don't think that there are too many users that are hopping onto a DeFi protocol not understanding the larger vision or where this brand actually exists within the ecosystem. They're being programmed to trust it based off of other signals that they saw elsewhere, right? Whether it's that long form post that made them understand where this platform is going and why they should be using it. It's the social signals that they see from other people on Twitter and Farcaster, et cetera, to make them trust that this is a platform that they should be using.
Absolutely. And A big concept, Web 2 marketing, of course, is attribution. It's like, hey, how do we know that the money we're spending on ads or the content we're creating actually is resulting in new TVL or actually resulting in people purchasing? So let's talk a little bit about like what is marketing attribution, and then how does that exist in Web3 land?
Yeah. So marketing attribution, as you alluded to as well, is basically how do I know where a user came from and across the internet, whether that's Twitter, blog post, an ad, or something else, made it to our website and then did the conversion event that we care about, that ultimately matters to our business. Um, Web3 attribution is in the standard marketing attribution, fundamentally it's the same, but there's some core differences in Web3 marketing attribution that I think make it more interesting than it could have been before. In the Web2 sense, you're basically trying to understand traffic that's coming from different channels that converts on our website or not. But what Web3 uniquely opens up is sort of a middle step of the people that converted. You can see traffic quality, as I like to say. Like you can see the wallets that connect to your website. You can see, which one of them which one of them have interacted on protocols that you care about, which ones have like higher wallet balances, etc. So you can actually, for the first time, get a sense of traffic quality without conversions. And the reason why that's important and impactful is that in Web 2 land, we're basically like the law of large numbers, right? You have this like getting all this traffic, all this attention, you're trying to convert a small amount of it down into the conversion metrics that you care about, and you judge it based off how it converts. But in Web3, we can actually judge the quality of a channel's traffic before they convert. And that actually can be very impactful for product decisions alike. Because you can say, this channel brought us 100 users, but they were really, really high quality users, and we know that based off of their wallet, right? Versus this other channel brought us 50,000 users, and the quality of the wallets that it brought was meaningless or really low. And we got a couple conversions accordingly. And so with that low volume but high quality channel, you might think to yourselves, how can we redefine? Maybe it's not a problem, right, of um, this channel, right? Maybe it's a problem of our website, right? That we're not converting high quality users. And how can we redesign our product funnel to ensure that those high quality users are making it through the funnel? So I think that this is an interesting aspect of attribution that pushes some of the burden of performance back onto the actual products themselves, rather than blaming the channels themselves for not delivering the conversions that they're seeking.
Let's talk about how that works, and maybe we'll walk through some marketing examples. Is this something like, hey, you embed some kind of Google Tag Manager pixel, and then you're tracking people as they go, or is there like UTMs? And let's say you're running like a KOL campaign. Let's talk about like some of the traditional marketing campaigns we'd have and how we track them.
Yeah. So um, the way that you would do it in the Web 2 sense is exactly as described, and it looks very similar in the Web 3 sense as well. So with Safari, with our tracking platform, you put a small snippet of code into the header of your website, and then we track and pick up all the wallets that connect to your website and everything that they do on your website. So for example, like this wallet connected to your website, and then they deposited this amount, they withdrew it right afterwards, and then they went and swapped on your protocol. So to be able to understand both from the first party lens, like what is this user doing, what pages did they visit, and like then with that information, enriching it with the on-chain activity of that user, so the broader context. So attribution in in many ways actually means a little bit more than it did in a Web 2 sense. It's not just about the user journey, it's also about enriching those user profiles with on-chain context to truly understand which are your most impactful users and channels.
Yeah, so let's take an example here. Let's say I have the Jax protocol. It's some DeFi. People deposit money, and I give them some sort of yield on it. I have the Safari pixel embedded in my landing page, so I know when people connect, now I get their wallet. But let's say I was running a few different campaigns. Like I was running a KOL campaign. I had bought some ads in a newsletter. How do I know where they came from before they came to my landing page?
Yeah. So the Safari script also picks all of that up. So it'll say this user came from Twitter, they land on your website, they connected your wallet, their wallet to the Jax protocol, and they did XYZ. And then hopefully they ended up doing the conversion event that you care about. And so we could say this is the ROI from Twitter based off of that journey. And then for deeper funnel tracking, you can use traditional UTM links that also come out of the box with Safari to say, I don't just want to know that a user came from Twitter, the channel. I want to know that a user came from this tweet that we posted. And that's the time in which you would use a UTM link of some kind to be able to attribute back to that tweet. A user clicked the link in that tweet, and you know that converted to XYZ on your protocol.
Absolutely. So now we've got our Safari Pixel. Jax Protocol is very happy because now we know where conversions are coming from. Talk about what sets Safari apart from other marketing or growth platforms in the Web3 space.
Yeah, I think what sets us apart is that second piece that I mentioned. It's really not enough in Web3 to just understand the user journey and how users are converting from off-chain channels to on-chain actions. It's really the robustness of our customer profiles that sets us apart. So teams can now see a level of detail on user profiles that they never could have imagined in Web2. You can see who they are based off of their on-chain social identities, which we pull in both the ENS and also Farcaster identities based off of the wallets that they verified. You can see their social graph based off of Farcaster if they have a Farcaster ID. So you can see who that user also knows, what posts that they engage with on Farcaster. You can see what they own, the wallet data that they have, what protocols they transact on, where they typically go, what are the top assets that they hold, those types of things. And then finally, you can see what they've done on your website, when they connected, what pages they visited, how much they deposited, what networks they were on, how many wallets they connected to your website, which wallets those are. And then our platform brings it all together. So it's a really unique way to see really detailed profiles. And as I mentioned before, my background's in marketing, and I can be the first to tell you that customer profiles of this kind were extremely difficult to create in Web 2. I worked at both small companies and a larger one as large as Series D, where we had an entire data arm around our marketing efforts, and we didn't have the types of insights that you can see when leveraging on-chain and off-chain data profiles together in the unique way that Safari provides. So the way I see it is that you don't have to be an enterprise giant in Web3 to get this level of understanding. Teams big and small can get really detailed user profiles out of the box using Safari.
So now Jax Protocol, we have great, customer profiles. We know a lot about people. We're like, what kind of actual insights? So talk about some of the actions you would take now that you have these robust, customer profiles.
Yeah, there are a few different things that people do with these robust customer profiles. On the most basic sense, it is I want to be able to message and get in touch with this user. That was extremely difficult to do when you're just looking at a wallet address. But matching it with a Farcaster ID, then you can actually have an inbox where you can reach that person. And that's also another opportunity that Farcaster brings, right? Farcaster is still a new channel. A lot of people have their inbox DMs open on Farcaster in a way that they don't necessarily on Twitter or LinkedIn or other profiles. And because it's a smaller network, you also have a higher chance of being able to get through to that user on that channel over LinkedIn and Twitter DMs, which are most definitely spammed. So that's one method. Another is to start to segment these users out, right? So to look on Safari and say, I want to see all the users that completed our core KPI. Let's say that's a swap. But they haven't been to the website in the last 2 weeks. Show me all of those users that are potentially a churn risk. And I want to be able to engage those users or users like those users. So this is a way that you can both proactively retarget and message them to make sure that you're keeping yourselves top of mind for some of your most important users that might be exploring other protocols and might be getting bored of yours, or to create a segment of your highest quality users and then create a lookalike audience of that, for example, on Twitter to run ads against, to try and get more of those types of users coming to your protocol.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question because we don't often seem to talk about ads in Web3 land. Maybe for like the big place like a crypto.com or like a Coinbase. Where do you see ads as a strategy here, or is it not used that often?
It hasn't been used as often by, I'd say, the broad swath of smaller to mid-level teams, but for mid-size to enterprise-ish size teams in crypto, they're running ads all the time. Um, and so they're doing it on Web3 native ad networks like Hyplab and Slice. They're doing it on sort of the OGs of the ad network space, like the Coinzillas and the BitMedias of the world. And they're also exploring new types of ad networks that are coming to market now. I believe that we are in for a great opportunity for Web3 marketers in this moment to start leveraging ads because it hasn't been as utilized. We're kind of in this, there's this great moment, I'd say, right now where there's still some bias against ads, which means that people aren't using it as much. But now there's more competition than ever among ad networks themselves, which means that that will drive down costs, right? So you can have an asymmetric opportunity to have lower costs on ad networks than you could have, you might like a year from now on these ad networks right now. And also there's less competition for the reach that they'll provide you. So that would be one to watch if you're a Web3 growth leader in this current moment.
Yeah, let's say you're a Web2, you're historically a Web2 growth leader, you're coming into the Web3 space and you're hearing about some of these ad networks you've never heard from before. And you're like, oh, I know Google ads, I know Facebook ads. Where would you recommend they go to either learn about this, or is there like a centralized marketplace or a decentralized, centralized marketplace where they could, easily buy ad placements?
Yeah, I'd say actually the first place to look is Safary creates these market maps of the Web3 growth ecosystem. And so we have maps that show all the different ad networks that exist. That's a great place to start. Go and start reaching out to those different ad network companies, see who the players are and what the different types of offerings they have are. Truthfully, there hasn't been that much written about the ad networks because it's sort of a new and upcoming channel. So this is a great opportunity to learn directly from these teams about what their vision is and what types of cost and conversion metrics they can expect from them.
Absolutely. So we talked about, ad networks. We've talked a little bit about Farcaster. Let's talk about the emerging channels for growth in Web3 that you see. So we talked about ads, Farcaster, Telegram comes up a bunch. Where do you see like major, emerging channels?
Yeah, I think Telegram is another one, but I think that still a lot of these emerging channels are would be using old channels in new ways is what I'd say is like a lot of how I see like Web3 marketing being done. Discord was never intended to be used for the way that Web3 communities used it. And that created, new sort of like channel opportunity for people back in the day. So I think that the way that Web3 growth leaders should be thinking is like, what are the channels that are the most used and how can I use it in a new way? So, one of those ways obviously is Telegram. We know that they're out there. A lot of companies are experimenting with Telegram ads right now as well, building out lookalike audiences, creating groups, DMing them individually. That's definitely one channel that we see people experimenting with. But Twitter as well, right? Like not that many people are creating lookalike audiences of their on-chain users and then targeting them that way. They've been sort of more doing either direct content or sort of like broad-based Twitter marketing. So the more that you can use these existing distribution networks in new ways with new data, I think are where you can get asymmetric upside for your growth strategy.
Yeah, two things that I don't think were mentioned were one, Twitter Spaces, and then two, PR. Do you have any, opinion on those two channels and whether they should be utilized and in what form?
I will be the first to say that I'm like pretty bearish on PR in general. I think that it's great for one thing, which is like announcing a fundraise or something of that nature to um, get your brand out there. But I think that the reach that a lot of these PR agencies people perceive to be a lot higher than it actually is. It's great for getting your brand out there and starting to rank for SEO. But as I mentioned before, a lot of these companies are operating on a shorter term basis than an SEO strategy might provide them. So I think that it has its place, but it shouldn't be a core part of your strategy. On the Twitter Spaces side, we don't use them as much, but I think that that's a great way to humanize your brand. Going back to what I mentioned before of like the brands that we see being built are being built around people, not around like the top level domain brand. And so Twitter Spaces gives you a great opportunity for people to hear your voice, hear your thoughts, and that really humanizes a brand and gets people excited about the people. Ultimately, people follow people, and so however you can get your voice out there, either like written as content or your actual voice, which is a very humanizing aspect, the better, in my opinion.
And there's one final one that we didn't talk about much is conferences. I seem to see most business get done at conferences. For all the online stuff we do, it seems like every client comes from a conference.
Definitely. I think that conferences, I'd say probably having a booth is not worth it. But having sort of like some of these like more targeted, smaller events certainly can be. Especially if you're the one hosting it. I'm not so excited about like having your paying $1,000 to have your logo and like a sea of 100 logos on like on a large side event. I don't think that that's worth it. But like hosting a 100-person happy hour, and getting the chance to like really showcase your brand and bring good people together, it definitely can be. We see conferences as a great opportunity for us to build deeper relationships with our existing customers and also to hear about other teams that they're working with and get introductions to those teams in that way as well. Because I agree, we are very much a people focused industry. People trust people, and you get the sense of a person's personality and their work ethic through seeing them at conferences, and meeting the people that they meet, seeing their social graph in person.
Yeah, it is wild how different some people's perceptions are of people online and then when they meet them in person. And then I would say the biggest alpha, to use a crypto term, is getting into the private dinners. I would network like heck to get into just private dinners because that's probably the most important thing of all.
Absolutely. And for those founders listening, the next best is to host a private dinner and try and get those people to try and get into your private dinners. So,
Yeah, that is a that's a good. Hey, I am open for private dinners. Let me just say that. DMs open. So we talked about Twitter Spaces. Is there anything, because I don't spend that much time on Farcaster, what I'm realizing from this interview is I definitely need to. Talk a little bit about Farcaster and some of the opportunities there. Is there like a Spaces equivalent, or is it largely just like, hey, what you're doing on Twitter is probably going to work on Farcaster?
yeah, I would say that what you're doing on Twitter is probably not going to work on Farcaster. Is an
Ooh.
interesting take that I realized growing both my personal brand and our company brand on Farcaster over the last like few months. Farcaster is very topic specific. So they have these things called channels, which are kind of like forums on Reddit. And that's how you get distribution, right? So you can't just post the same things that you would post on Twitter unless you have a distinct channel that you think that that content would fit well into, if that makes sense, and that would align with the people that care about that topic. So I think that brings both like shortcomings and opportunities. Shortcomings is like you can't just do like a cross posting blindly into Farcaster, but the opportunity is a lot of these channels are deep communities within themselves of people who really care about that topic and are hyper focused on it. And so it gives you the opportunity to segment down into the people that you ultimately really want to reach on Farcaster, in a way that you might not have the same opportunity when you're sort of casting a wider net into Twitter.
Yeah, so that's a good 80/20. Are there any channels you recommend where you're like, hey, if you're coming from Twitter, like you got to check out these, like Farcaster will be confusing, but here's how we get you, up and running in the next 30 days.
Yeah, the thing that I've found that works the best is to look for, especially when you're first starting out your account, the way that you basically become legitimate within the algorithm is having, quote, power badge holders. So there's this concept within Farcaster where Farcaster has labeled and probably somewhat algorithm driven accounts that they think are legitimate. And there are like I think there are around like 5,000 power badge holder accounts. So it's a good amount. Basically, if you're relatively active, you will get the power badge. But in order to get the power badge, you need power badge holders to engage with your account. So the immediate question is, okay, so how do I do that? The best way that I've seen is to go and look for low follower channels that are moderated by a high follower account, if that makes sense. So, for example, the growth channel has 2,000 followers, which is like, on the smaller side, but it's moderated by a person that has like 60,000 followers, right? So, this person is going to be engaging with any content that they think is good within the growth topic within their own channel. So, that gives you a great opportunity to start to build up credibility within a certain channel being engaged with by certain power badge users. And then from there, you can scale to larger and larger channels and more topics as a result.
I like this as like island hopping theory for World War II. It's like you identify some small islands you can completely take over, and then you use those as launching points into larger places. Okay, so the growth channel you would recommend. Any specific other ones?
So one of the biggest and most popular channels out there is the Founders channel. That I think you have to build up some of your credibility before you can start ranking within the Founder channel. But that is just like, a broad channel where people post about what they're building, the cool things that they're building, founder level insights, advice for other people. It is really kind of, I'd say, like the traditional, you send everything there that you would send to Twitter probably in terms of like insights, but you do have to work your way up to get into it, to get seen in that channel through existing in smaller communities first. But that I'd say is like once you're ranking in the Founder channel, you're going to be Gucci.
Yeah. So let's talk about channel ranking. Oh, and I realize my editor's probably going to shoot me for running very much over time, but this is too interesting. Okay. So is it possible to post on multiple channels at the exact same time?
Yeah. It makes your feed look not great, and it's not super encouraged, as you can imagine, but you certainly can.
All right. I need to I'll have to figure out Farcaster in the next 30 days. I'll just make a YouTube video on it, because when I got the Farcaster, I was like, this is confusing. I don't understand this place. I don't know what's going on.
And I think that the reason why it's confusing for a lot of users is what we're saying, right? They expect Twitter, but it's actually something slightly different. And so you need
Yeah.
to understand the like channel meta before you can like actually engage and get engagement.
Absolutely. Maybe that could be a good follow up. The biggest Farcaster person we've had on was Jacek from DGen, but we more talked about like building the token and the tipping stuff. I'll have to do many more Farcaster episodes. So let's talk a little bit about, finally, like where can people learn about Safary, like get involved with your projects, get involved with you online?
You can find us at safary.club. That's Safari with a Y. For anything regarding our product or our community, or on our Twitter, which is also at Safari Club. That's a great way to learn more about all the different Web3 growth resources, and most importantly, to see all of our Web3 growth and marketing memes.
Well, absolutely, Justin. Thank you so much for coming on here. This is definitely one of my favorite episodes. To all the Web3 marketers and founders out there, let's go get involved in Farcaster. Let's go follow Justin online and get involved with Safary.